Welcome to Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. Hello, and welcome to this special episode of Mocktails and Masterpieces. I'm Dana Stone, the Executive Director of the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, and I'm here today with Tucker McGrew, our Operations Coordinator, and we're going to be introducing the third part of our Score to Stage series, the Music Library. So we'll first start off kind of reintroducing. Tucker, if you want to give a quick introduction to yourself, and your role with the ICO.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Tucker. I started with the ICO at the beginning of the summer as their operations coordinator. So I oversee and help plan the logistical and behind the scene aspects of the concerts that help the musicians feel ready to go and help us have a good show.
Absolutely. So we're going to start from the bottom up, talking about what is a music library. And I'll say that the orchestra's music library looks a lot different than maybe what you envision when I say library. And in fact, the music library is right behind Tucker right now. So you'll see we have kind of some large, heavy duty bookshelves, and the music is stored flat so that it doesn't curl. It is alphabetized. I don't know if you want to pull one out and do a little show and tell.
Absolutely. Here's a Beethoven piece. So we keep them in these envelopes. There's a key in this corner so that when someone pulls it out, they can see what parts are included in here. Depending on what kind of music it is, it might tell us who bowed the music and when, and it will also have information about when we've performed it. So we kind of have a analog log of what is inside each envelope.
Yep. Additionally, we have like a massive kind of Google Drive document,
Yeah,
a sheet that lists the composer, the name of the piece. It has some bowing content. Doesn't I don't think it has instrumentation on it. So sometimes we have to come to the actual piece to see what we have. So let's talk quickly about what is the role of the music librarian. It's not a librarian in the sense that you remember from elementary school or beyond. So what's a music librarian?
absolutely. So at ICO, there's a few of us that kind of share the hat of music librarian depending on the day. So there's a team of us that I am a part of that helps keep all this music organized and ready to go. So together, our roles include finding where music that we don't already own and renting it for performances, organizing it on its arrival, or finding it in our own library and pulling it for a rehearsal. From there, we need to make sure we have all the parts, even if it's already here or if it's coming from afar, make sure that everything we think we have is what we have. We also have to do something called bowing. So we'll share the violin one part with our concertmaster, who will go through and mark the music to show the violin section when they should have an up bow and a down bow. He does this one because visually it creates a nice effect to see the string section um, synchronized together in the way that they're visually playing the instrument, but also based off of how he wants the style of a certain phrase to sound. He's gonna make sure that when he wants that weight on the bow or on the note, he has an up bow so that the weight of the arm is emphasizing what the string section is doing. And when he wants something lighter, it'll be a down bow. So it helps make sure that the musicians all understand the the contour of what they're playing, and it also looks nice. Um, so once we get back from the concert master, the librarian team is going to share his bowings with the principal players of the other string sections, and they'll use that to bow their music. So they keep it as similar to the concert masters as possible. But of course, the basses and the violin ones have fairly different parts. So sometimes they need to be doing something different. Um, when we get all that information back, the library team then has to hand mark those bowings in the parts for everyone else, because when we return this music to the rental company, it will have to be erased so that they get it back looking as if it was never written on. So we'll copy their markings down into the music before distributing it to the musicians. The way that we distribute this to the musicians is through two main ways. So we'll scan all the music that's going to be on a concert. I think we're supposed to talk about that more later, but we make an online database of the repertoire we're going to use, or we have folders with physical copies of the music that need to be ready to go for musicians. And we have a specific deadline that all has to be done in, because we request the music a certain amount of days ahead of a concert, and then we need to deliver it to the musicians a certain amount of days before a concert. So there's a fairly
significant lead time. Yeah.
Yes.
Big lead time, a lot of pre-planning in terms of like date range, so that all the pieces can kind of fall together at the same time. I want to talk about bowing just a little bit more, because I think it's a little bit of an abstract concept for someone that doesn't play a string instrument. And in full disclosure, neither Tucker nor I play a string instrument. But the reality is, I don't think audience members, a layperson, knows that that's not indicated in the music. The publisher, right, the composer doesn't say this is an up bow or this is a down bow. There may be some small exceptions where that's the case, but for the most part, those are artistic decisions. And that's why that work is entrusted to the concertmaster, who, is a leader within the orchestra, and it goes to the principal musicians of their section, because they are the leaders of that group. And so they kind of, they know their team, their family, and then they also have a little bit higher understanding of the artistic choices and the artistic license needed to kind of play a specific passage a certain way. And it can happen that maybe at the first rehearsal, Maestro Kramer is like, you know what, actually, let's make that a down bow, or I want this articulated differently. And that's one reason why it has to be done in pencil. And if it was pre-printed in the score, those sorts of adjustments couldn't happen in a rehearsal. So we do rely, as Tucker mentioned, to kind of scan these and share them with the musicians. Many of our musicians are local, but not all of them. And mailing rental parts is become a very dangerous situation. We can't really trust that they'll get there at the right time, or get there at all. The next thing we want to talk about is the cost of renting music versus purchasing music, and maybe a little bit how commissions fall into that whole bucket of the music library situation. So even if a piece is in public domain, you still have to pay for it. I think that's something that people may not realize, or it may not be in print to purchase. It may still have to be rented. Surprisingly enough, a music rental is significantly more expensive than a music purchase in many cases. And in other cases, depending on where the music is coming from, the age of the composer, the Russian composers specifically are way more expensive than the European composers. Whether they're living or not, that's sort of the thing that we experience. So we can have a piece that, like on our Parks concert, that's more of a pops piece, like a Wicked medley, for example, that's $99 to purchase, or as much as $1,800 for us to rent a Shostakovich piece or a Prokofiev. Yeah. And that's based on the number of performances and the size of our hall. So they take those factors into consideration. So sometimes just getting the physical pieces of paper to do all this other work is costly and labor intensive on a manual level. Commissions are a little bit different. It sort of depends on the composer, if they are already with a publisher or not. In some cases, they'll send us digital parts that we will then print. And then the process starts just like a rental, where we have to mark everything. and in some cases, a commission is pre-printed, and then we pay to get those parts to us. So there's a whole process that happens with just getting the music to the musicians that you don't see. Rental periods, those also vary. How they charge for rentals varies. Some publishers require that we pay it up front. Some send us a bill afterwards. We're sometimes dealing with international customs to get the music here and get the music back. So it's a very interesting process. So next up, let's talk about the next step, Tucker, when we actually have all the music here and what happens next. So we've got 5 envelopes of music that encompasses all the repertoire on a specific concert.
Absolutely. So when the music arrives, and like you mentioned, this can vary based off the publisher, but they include a list or they include papers on top of the music. So they'll have something about guidelines for here's how we expect the music to look when it comes back to us. There's going to be a paper about here's our expectation for when you're going to ship it back to us. And then there will be a packing slip. So we make sure we keep all of that information. So we follow through on their expectations after the concert. The first thing we want to do is go through the music and make sure what's on the packing slip is what we received, because sometimes we need to reach out to a publisher and let them know, oh, can you please like mail one more cello part, for example. Um, for some concerts, we've learned that we want to go through the music because obviously mistakes can happen to anyone, and we've had music sometimes arrive where pages are printed out of order or missing a page or something. So flip through and make sure everything looks correct. And then once we're sure that we have the right materials, the first step is going to be scanning that violin one part to send to our concertmaster so that he can bow it. We'll normally scan the winds parts and the percussion parts since they don't need markings on them, and we can do that kind of outside of the bowing timeline. Typically, we will get that bowed music back from our concertmaster in about 10 days to 2 weeks. And at that point, we'll start marking the other paper copies. That is an intricate process because you have to use a certain kind of pencil and you have to mark very lightly so that you're able to get rid of the markings easily. And sometimes the previous orchestra won't have erased their markings, so we may be erasing someone else's work and then adding ours in. And so thankfully, we have a really awesome team of interns that helps us with that with a smile because it can be a little tedious.
We're really grateful for them. They're not on this call, but fortunately, both of them are string players, so
Yes,
they also understand the uniqueness of those instruments. In addition to marking bowings, in some cases, we're double checking that measures are marked, rehearsal letters or numbers are included. Let's talk about page turns, taping, collating, because
for
that's
sure.
another layer that people may not realize is part of the factor too.
Absolutely. So when we get music that is newer, it's normally printed on just like 8.5 by 11 normal paper. And in order to connect everything, since it's not bound, we'll tape that music together because we want to be able to take it apart before we send it back to the rental company. But when we're taping the music together, we need to make sure that the way everything is connected sets the musicians up for success when they're turning the page, which could look like if they have a lot of rest, that's a good time to make sure there's a page turn. Whereas if the page ends and they're in the middle of playing something drastic, we ideally not want to have a page turn there. Um, of course, in the string section, I say of course, so maybe not everyone knows this. The inside player of every 2 sets of string players is going to turn the pages for the outside player that shares a stand. So that way, at least half the string section can play through the page turn. But we ideally, obviously, want to have everyone playing as much as possible. So being strategic about that and keeping music organized and clean is really important so that when they get it, they can just sit down and play it without having to decipher what we've done to it.
Right. Rehearsal time is expensive. I haven't actually broken it down to the minute. Maybe that's something I need to do. So just so we all know, each minute, but each minute does cost money. And in a 2.5 hour call, we're looking at about $5,500 worth of musician costs alone, minimum, depending on the performance. So each second matters. So ensuring that they're set up for success, like Tucker said, they're not having to make a lot of corrections. And sometimes, mistakes happen, or like I said, artistic decisions change in the moment. That's very true with commission work, because we sometimes have a MIDI file to listen to. So there's like an electronic version of the music, but it's not the same as a tried and true Beethoven piece where we know about the performance history and the performance styles. And we may have opinions, but there's at least a tradition to fall back on. So that creates something. So the music comes in piles by piece. Then after all this work happens, it's divided out by instrument. And then it's put into folders. And then, of course, at the end of everything, it's recollated back into a by piece,
Yeah.
into each envelope. So there's a lot of like hands-on logistical, tedious level work that goes into the music library, which doesn't sound like a library at all, but that is the role of the music librarian, and kind of how this behind the scenes process really allows what you see as an audience member come to life. So you touched on it a little bit. Let's talk about challenges and surprises. So maybe talk
Yes.
about like instrumentation lists that aren't exactly what maybe even the publisher's website says it should be. A pop-up of like a celeste or something random in the score that we didn't know about. Those sorts of things.
Absolutely. A fun story. We were looking to rent a Shostakovich piece, which we'll actually be performing on November 22nd. So you can buy a ticket for that. But there were two versions of this Shostakovich piece, and we learned that in the United States, um, one publisher owned the chamber version to the Shostakovich in the United States. A different publisher owned the chamber version to the rest of the world, and outside the United States, it was flipped. So it was a complicated process to even figure out which publisher we need to be in contact to find this piece. Then, when we got to their website, the instrumentation for the chamber version was listed as the instrumentation for a full orchestra version. So we were fairly confused about where exactly we were going to find this music. Meister Kramer spoke up while we were deliberating, trying to find this, and guessed that we should reach out to the publisher and see if maybe their website just had it listed incorrectly. And so on a whim, we reached out and they sent us a copy of the score that they had listed for that piece, and it turned out Meister Kramer was correct. And the title was correct, but they had listed an instrumentation that didn't match, and so we were able to um, purchase the right music. We also have seen music where sometimes a piano player is asked to play a celeste, and when that happens, until we get the music, we're unsure if it's something like at our Parks concert where our piano player just hits one chord and then she's done. That's all the celeste does. Or if it's something like one of our pieces in November where half of a piece is going to be played on celeste. So then from there, the library and operations kind of mix because we have to decide, are we going to have a real celeste on site, or are we going to just have an electronic keyboard to cover one note? Um, so we have to kind of check interesting things.
Oh, and
And
additionally, like if they play at the same time or not. So
right, because you
obviously
might
they
need two
do,
people.
then we got to hire another person. And sometimes you can't know that from what you can find on a publisher's website in the Daniels book of just like a master encyclopedia of music. So it's a little bit of a discovery process too.
Yeah. We were like Dana mentioned, we were working on the collating process for a piece we commissioned yesterday. And in the music, we see that the individual part sheet music, it was notated that our harp player and piano player were going to need wire brushes like a jazz drum set player would use. Um, so sometimes you just have to go through the parts and find these weird things, or I shouldn't say weird, but unusual things that the composer calls for, so that we are getting the equipment needed to set the musicians up for success.
Feel like I know you touched on it a little bit, the challenges about our upcoming concert. So I know that this mocktail is previously recorded, just so you know. But this weekend is actually the opening of Ben Hur. You'll be hearing this next week. So those of you that attended the concert will think back and be like, huh, did I notice anything odd? And the answer is you won't. But the Ben Hur parts, the music parts that came to us, the publisher had told us that they were so destroyed and damaged by the previous orchestra that played that they wanted to reprint everything, which is exciting. It's brand new, it's clean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was collated by a 19-year-old or not, but pages were not, it was bound, and pages were not in order, and pages were missing. Was an entire
Yeah.
instrument missing? I don't know.
No, I don't think so, but I would say like the French horn part specifically, there was all kinds of surprises in there. And the violin two part, I think those were the two that were strange. Um, so then we had to communicate with a publisher that is overseas about getting music to us quickly, because since one of the instruments that was messed up is a violin two part and requires bowings, and the clock was ticking on us getting this music to the musicians starting on time. So we had to work with an international company to get fit something through customs to get it here on time correctly so we could mark it and then give it to the musicians. So exciting stuff.
That was the thing. We're hoping we'll have our fingers crossed that our rehearsal on this Friday um, doesn't unveil something that we missed, because even looking carefully at the music, things could be awry.
Yeah.
What we see a lot in commission works is maybe a lack of rehearsal numbers, or rehearsal numbers aren't consistent throughout the parts, and something like that is very hard to catch, just looking at the music, not having heard it. um, it's hard to know what's not there. You know what's there, but
Right.
you don't necessarily know what's not there. So that's a challenge that we, the music librarian and Tucker on the fly, really sometimes in a rehearsal may have to run back to the office and print something off or make an adjustment. That could be even for a page turn that we didn't get right, and we just want an extra page so that they have four, so to minimize the page turn. So lots of things that
Right.
happen sort of in the moment, as well as the amount of work that happens in the advanced stages of preparation.
Yeah, we had when we hosted the International Double Reed Society, one of the pieces we received from a soloist on a concerto, the violin one part, it was like really difficult to read, and we had to in a rehearsal like transcribe the parts and write it out so that they could read it with the light they were going to have on stage. So definitely surprises all the time.
Mm-hmm. So I would say the music library is something that's highly organized, but also highly stressful, because there's just a lot of things that you can't anticipate, even as you try to anticipate anything that could possibly go wrong. And I
Yeah,
think that's probably one of the things that's super exciting about live performance. There's always something that happens. Um, and and how can we mitigate that and then be ready for anything that could happen, in terms of performance, whether it's library or it's a tech issue. It's exciting. Our jobs they don't get boring. They're different every day.
for sure.
Well, thank you for listening to our Score to Stage series. We are excited to complete episode 3 today, and look forward to catching you at an upcoming ICO concert. You can always learn more at icomusic.org, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Tucker.
Yeah, bye everyone.